Hey, welcome back, guys, to another episode. Today, I wanted to prepare for you a market report for the month of March, covering the condo market in the Mississauga and the North York downtown core regions. And I'll be discussing the two-bedroom and one-bedroom units. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions about it. So I'm going to just jump right in and go through this market report for you just right now. Okay, so I'm going to take a look in the Mississauga two-bedroom market to start, and then I'll jump over to the one-bedroom. So for the month of March, we saw average prices hovering around $563,083, and the median prices were $535. And in total, there were 63 transactions where 12.7% of these units sold above their list price. And on average, it took about 28 days for these two-bedroom units to sell in the Mississauga market. Historically speaking, the median prices, we can see here, there was a peak we had the highest price at $625,000 in April of 2024, which then steadily dropped and declined. And in January, we saw prices at $548, which didn't change much till now $535 as of today. Transaction volume, we saw a peak here, 112 in 2023, and in May, 100 to now 63 transactions as of today, as of March, where the active listings we saw in January hovering 349, which then started to increase to now 436. So a good jump in active listings. For the median days on market, we noticed actually a gradual increase and then peak into January 25, which is typical for winter months where things start to really slow down. But then in February, we saw a drop to 22 days to now 23 days on average is what you can expect. Months inventory tells us how many number of months it takes theoretically to sell all existing units at the current sales pace. So as you can see here, we saw a strong seller's market in the beginning of 2024, which steadily started to become a balanced market in the summer of 2024. And then in January, December, we hovered around 6.6, 6.5, and now we're at 6.92, which is within balance, but tending towards the buyer's market at that month. Actively, as of today, we can expect price ranges to be concentrated between $400,000 to just under $800,000, where you see most of the units, so in this case, 211 of the units being priced between $500,000 to just under $600,000, and 145 units being priced between $600,000 to just under $700,000. Similarly, for 34 units, we have between price $700,000 to just under $800,000 in Mississauga. Now, for the one-bedroom market, we saw average sold prices at $477,559, and the median being $460K. Total, there were 17 transactions where 17.6% of these units sold above their list price. And total took roughly around 28 days to sell these units. Looking at the median price range history, we saw a peak roughly at around $565. This was back in April 2023. And then fast forward in January, we saw prices at $493,500, the median price range, and to then dropping to $460,000. For transaction volume, we noticed a steady decline from 28 back in May of 2024, which then dipped all the way to 6 very low transactions in January. And that's steadily started going back up again to now 17. And for active listings, we saw roughly 107 in November 2024 and peaking back up to 112 in February and to now 109. So if you take a look at months inventory, we can see here the correlation between transaction volume listing, active listings. During that January month where we had very little sales and lots of active listings, we could see the correlation in the months inventory where we had 16 and a half, which is a huge staggering number. In February, we came back to a bit normal levels, 6.22 to now 6.41. So we are in a balance, but trending towards a buyer's market range. Now, turning our attention to the North York region of C7 and C14, which is concentrated around the Willowdale East and Willowdale West and the surrounding neighborhoods within those districts. We're going to take a look at the condo segments In March, we saw an average sold prices at around $651,825, where the median price range was around $635,500. And in total, we saw 24 transactions in that month, where 41.7% of the units sold above the list price. So big difference from Mississauga market, as you can see. Total took about 26 days on average to sell these units on the market. Now, if you take a look at the historical median price ranges, as you can see here, we had a peak at around $755,000 back in July 2023, which then we saw steady decline and a little uptick in October, 725 again. And then most recently in January, it dropped to about $640,250 to then coming back down to $635,500. For transaction volume, we could see a steady decline here where we had 37 in May 2024, dropping to about 20, the dip at September 2024. Now we are back at 24 transactions. In active listings, we see here 154 at the peak of October 2024, dipping at about 101 active listings in December to now 125 in the month of March. What this translates to is that the months of inventory, we peaked at 7.4 months of inventory in September 2024, dipping to 3.67, which is more towards the seller's market side. And now we're at 5.21, which brings us to a balanced market for this segment. And finally, if we take a look at all the active listings in the MLS for today, we see the price range is concentrating between $500,000 to just under $900,000, where we have 51 units hovering around $600,000 to just under $700,000. Next, we have 40 units between $700,000 to just under $800,000, and then the 23 units between $500,000 to just under $600,000. Turning our attention to the one-bedroom market in North York, average sold prices we saw were around $509,897, where the median price ranges were at $510K. Total, we had 13 transactions where 23.1% of these units sold above their list price. And on average, it took about 31 days to sell these units in this current market. And looking at the historical median price trends, we did see a peak at around $532,500, which then started dropping to now very low number in January. We saw $501,500 to now, as of today, $510K. Transaction volumes, we saw only 4 in July, peaking to about 19 in November 2024. And in January, we saw 10 to now where we're at is 13 transactions. So lower numbers compared to 2 bedrooms. 1 bedroom seems to be not the most popular these days. And so these numbers do make sense. In active listings, we are seeing a peak here in October 2024, 61 units being actively listed, dipping to about 34 in December, till now 39. And what this translates to is our months of inventory peaking at about 14.25 in July, dipping to 2.53. So 14.2, dipping to 2.53 in November. So a strong seller's market at the time, till now 3.25, which is still just about entering the balanced market for this property type. And lastly, we have the price ranges for the active listings as of today, where we have prices concentrated between $400,000 to just under $700,000, where we have 24 of the units being priced between $500,000 to just under $600,000. And we have only 8 units between $400,000 to just under $500K, and lastly 6 units between $600,000 to just under $700,000. So there you have it. Hopefully you had some good insights. If you're about to enter into the market, this information could be helpful for you. And just some closing thoughts. On Wednesday, the Bank of Canada announced its first rate pause after 7 consecutive rate cuts since June 2024. Tim Macklem announced that he would pause the key interest rate at 2.75%. And this decision reflects Bank of Canada's cautious approach during significant uncertainties, particularly those arising from the recent U.S. trade policies. And if you don't already know, the federal election is happening this coming week, April 28th. So I hope you all go out and vote, because your vote does matter. And to that end, I want to wish you all a happy Easter and a really good long weekend with your family members. And I'll talk to you guys on the next video. Cheers.